Hello, lovers and friends. Now, this is another episode of Monday Motivation. I know it's Easter. Hello, lovers and friends. This is another episode of Monday Motivational. I have decided to release this episode a little bit later in the day, midday vibes, because I'm assuming everybody's enjoying a long weekend, a well-deserved long weekend. And who really wants to think about going back to work? You know what I mean? So, because this is not an ordinary Monday, this will not be an ordinary episode in terms of, the time that it'll be posted. But we will still keep the motivation going because, honestly, my first intention was to not necessarily complain, but I had already sort of reflected on this topic and I had a specific perspective. But as I spent more time marinating in the topic and really thinking about, like, okay, cool, so I didn't like this thing, what am I going to do about it? And really sort of pose that question to myself, I found myself in a different position. So I'm excited to share my thoughts. So let's sit back, relax, and get into today's topic. So, as promised last week, I said that I would get into the very tiny, tiny, tiny dark side of my experience with Shoot for Purpose. And honestly, it's not necessarily objectively bad. It's just my experience. And it made me think about, sort of specifically with the work that I do, how I maybe also perpetuate this with other people. But let me not get lost in the weeds and let me start from the beginning. So, the one thing that I think I didn't really appreciate is when I heard the other mentors talk about the program to other people, when they explained what we were about. Now, understandably, we would be a group of like 12, 15 people walking around with cameras, taking pictures of things and people and all the sorts. So you can understand how people would feel uncomfortable with our presence in the space. They feel surveilled, maybe. They might not feel comfortable, having their picture taken, and they worry that we might not even ask for their consent when taking the picture, right? Or just general benign curiosity, wondering like, oh, these people with their black, bags, what's written on the bag? What are they doing? Or, ooh, can this person actually take my picture? You know what I mean? So those of us, or people who are brave enough to ask, right? Sometimes our mentors would answer and sometimes we would answer, depending on who the individuals approached. Now, this is where things got tricky. I would hear other women in the group, right? Because only women are allowed in the group. Or it's a program specifically geared towards women, let me say that. But the other women in the group, when they were approached, I'd overhear them saying like, oh, it's just a program for women to explore photography. Or other people would say, well, it's just a short photography course. And the focus was more so on just, we're learning, right? We're beginners, we're students. And the focus was on photography, right? However, when I'd hear the mentors describe it, they would say that, well, we have a bunch of women who've had rough lives, who are really going through the most, and they would sell the sob story and say that we empower and uplift women through photography. And it was like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, now, in that moment, I kind of felt like this this backpack that I'm wearing, right? This little tog bag that I'm wearing that has Shoot for Purpose, that just by associating with this group, I'm, broadcasting to everybody that, it's Strug City for me. You know what I mean? That I need charity. That, I'm struggling. So much so that I need a program to empower me. That I am incapable of empowering myself in some way, right? And I know that is not the intention of, what they mean when they say this to people, and that description is in fact true, right? That they do specifically go for people who need a space to feel safe, to explore something new, to reinvent themselves, right? And they do so successfully. They do so every time, right? That I myself, as a product of the program and the course, have taken away so much, and I feel so uplifted and, dare I say, empowered because of the program, right? These people do a lot of good, but it just didn't feel great being described in that way. It didn't feel so great to be described as someone who was lacking and in need of external validation and support, right? That I didn't want to be associated with such, because I never want anyone to sort of see me as weak or incapable of doing something or providing something for myself, right? So that was hard. I'm not gonna lie. It was a hard thing. It made me wince every time I'd hear it. And there was one time where there was even a workshop, right? We attend this workshop, and it's a Fujifilm workshop, and they're talking about all the different like preset programs and things you can do with the cameras, and the latest camera that just came out, and this, that, and the other, and da 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 da, and there's Relia, and there's this, and you need to get your ISO like this, and you need to, set your whatever to automatic or manual. You need to do this, and mirrorless, and da da da, and it was just like amazing. And I had initially just wanted to attend to learn and absorb as much information as I could, because I realized how flustered I was with the camera and how I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. So I wanted to be better and do better, and therefore I went, I went to the workshop. And when I got there, I saw that there were a whole bunch of other photographers there, people who like literally do this for a living. You know what I mean? People who've been in the game for a long time. This one guy who was in the audience ended up answering most people's questions before the presenter could. And the presenter was even sort of like referring to him or sort of leaning on him and his expertise to answer some difficult questions, and it was just like I felt like an imposter in the space already, because all these people, like, they're out here and they're like cinematographers and a professional wedding photographer and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 blah. And they're talking about all these things, and everyone has a shorthand, and I'm just furiously taking notes, trying to be like, bitch, look this up, look this up, look this up. And eventually one of the Fuji guys comes through, and it's a guy who had actually, visited one of our Shoot for Purpose sessions. And, he comes in and he's just like, oh yeah, and the ladies at the back are actually from Shoot for Purpose, and, they do this, that, and the other. And I was just like, oh, and he described us as, these women who are really going through a tough time, and and he pulled the sad face, and he's just like, yeah, these women just need a little bit of support, a little bit of loving. These women are just really going through it, and they join the Shoot for Purpose program and take up photography as a way to save themselves from their dire circumstances. And yeah, some people turned around to take a look at us, and like, I was just like, wow. Like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Um, it was like absolutely wild and uncomfortable, right? Um, and my initial thought about that was like, I don't like being described this way, you know? But I immediately caught myself in that thought, and I'm like, bitch, you work for an NGO where low key part of your job is to sell these stories, right? Because that's what pulls in people's heartstrings, and that's what brings in funders, right? They want to know that they're doing good, that there is an impact, and that there's a positive impact, right? And that what they're funding or what they're, contributing towards, is something that will have a lasting impact on the community, the intended community. And having never been in the room, right, when people, like, I've obviously benefited from many NGOs and, development programs and so on and so forth, right? But I've been sort of removed from the conversations that are being had about the people who are benefiting from the program. When I am benefiting from the program, and when I'm not benefiting from the program and actually running the program, right, I am not part of the people who are benefiting, right? So I've always existed in one camp or the other, but have never sort of had the curtain broken where I am sitting directly in between, where I am all a beneficiary, one, but two, sort of an ambassador in the sense that I am in a position to further the story, to allow for the Shoot for Purpose people to continue to get funding and support so that they can continue doing this work for more women down the line. And I definitely believe in their work, and I think it would be fantastic if there was a Shoot for Purpose in Joburg and Durban, and it became like a countrywide thing, right? Still small cohorts, still something really small and intimate, because I think that certain things don't need to get too big, because the bigger they get, the more messy and the more far removed from its intended purpose it becomes. But still, to have those small, intimate spaces, for women to have a space away from everything else and everything else that stresses them, but just everything else in the world, right? To create a new world for themselves where it is just them, where they can be free, where they can be creative, where they can be safe. I think that's a beautiful thing, right? And I want their work to continue. So I'm not against this particular storytelling, because I understand the purpose it serves. However, I still don't appreciate being described in that way. But at the same time, it's true, right? When I'm in those funding meetings, I'm not making up bullshit stories about a child who's down on their luck and they look up at their coach and they're just like, thank you, this is the best day of my life. Like, no, I bring stats, I bring proof, I will bring a few anecdotal stories, but stories that are true, that I've witnessed myself. Stories that like bring the data to life, right? That put all this information into context. And I understand the purpose of these stories and the fact that they're true. And I think my discomfort mostly comes from not wanting to accept that that narrative in some way is true for me. Not feeling comfortable with the fact that someone might see that as the only story to tell about me, right? And that really made me interrogate how I continue to tell these stories when I have these meetings with these big investors. How I should work more on, still, as much as I'm driving this particular point home, that I make sure that I'm still painting a holistic picture of the individuals I am talking about, that they are not just these one dimensional beings, but that they are more than that. And I hope that that I was already doing that, by celebrating how amazing my children are, and how much potential they have, and how certain circumstances rob them of the opportunity to fully realize their potential. But that the programs that we offer and provide create a space for them to reclaim that space, for them to continue being the amazing, wonderful children that they are. But at the same time, I kind of feel dirty telling other people their stories, right? Because it's not my story to tell, in the same way that I don't feel comfortable and didn't feel comfortable with the mentors, sort of sharing a brief synopsis of our stories, right? Not to say that they weren't experiencing it as well, or that they didn't have some insight into what it's like to be in our position, right? But they weren't telling a story about themselves. They were telling a story about us, right? And that we're struggling, that we're going through the most. And it is true, we are. Everyone in that group was struggling in one way or another. Everyone in that group was going through something intense, something that you would never be able to guess just by looking at them, right? Even if you interacted with them for a full day. I was with those women for 5 weeks, and some of the stories that came out of them in the last week when we all had tea together was just the wildest. I was just like, oh my gosh, what the fuck, And it made me appreciate the space even more when I realized that I, one, wasn't alone, but two, that these women who've gone through so much have finally found a space where they can just be themselves, and that's something to be celebrated. But it was still a really difficult thing to sort of accept that this thing is true about me. Now, where am I going with this, right? Because we're at the 15-minute mark or 16-minute mark, and obviously this was just my initial thoughts, right? This is where I was going to end, if I'm being honest with you. When I first wanted to discuss this, I kind of just wanted to be like, yeah, be careful of, how you see other people, how you see yourself, da 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 da. And I'd be done with it. But I thought about it more and more and more, and now I'm at a point where I'm realizing that as much as I took issue with other people sort of saying whatever they needed to say, for whatever purpose, right? For me, I think the bigger issue is, what story am I telling about myself, right? How do I see myself? That as much as I may feel uncomfortable with these people telling a story of like, these women are going through a lot, and this program is a space for them to explore new things. I knew that about the program coming in, but that didn't stop me from seeing the other women in the group as more than just a sob story. I know that they all submitted and, submitted to the same application process that I did, right? I know that they had to answer those questions. I know that, for them to be here, that they must have said something really compelling, right? But as much as I may have just known that, that's not something that was on the forefront of my mind when I interacted with them. That I just embraced them for who they were, and I saw them for the amazing, bright, bubbly women that they presented themselves as, right? They didn't present themselves as their struggles. They presented themselves however they chose to, but I didn't see struggle and suffering and, shame, right? I didn't see any of that. And it's obviously because I wasn't looking for that, All of that was on the back of my mind. And honestly, it's only when the mentors brought up, the mission and vision of shoot for purpose that I was reminded of, oh yeah, actually. Because I also don't want to see myself in that way, right? But if I'm being honest with myself, right, when I am alone, the question becomes, what story am I telling myself about myself, right? And this is going back to one of our original, topics or themes for Monday Motivation, but it is the story you tell yourself about yourself matters. Because subconsciously, your subconscious mind is hearing you say all this shit about yourself. And your subconscious mind is also recoiling in the corner, feeling disgusted and, wondering, like, is that all that I am? Is that all you see when you see me? Right? Your inner child is sitting there in the corner of your mind saying, is that what I have become? If this is the story that you keep telling me about you, that you're just useless, that you're a procrastinator, that you're not good at anything, that you're fat, you're ugly, you're this, that, and the other, then is that all you see? Is that all I am to you? Do you get what I mean? And this becomes then the conversation with yourself. So that's what really hit me hard as I was marinating on this topic, because initially I just, was interested in the sort of quandary I find myself in, because I am the one telling stories on other people's behalf, but I don't appreciate how my story is being told on my behalf, right? As much as in both cases, it is true. But now when I think about it, right, even the story I tell about myself is on my own behalf. And is that story true? Is it accurate? Am I still shitting on myself by not celebrating everything that is amazing about me, right? By not speaking up for myself, by not defending myself, by accepting bullshit that, aligns with a narrative that should never be true to me, right? Because at least with the Shoot for Purpose mentors, they were telling the truth. It was a truth that maybe I was uncomfortable admitting, but it was true. Now, can I say the same about myself? Can I say that I am telling true and honest stories about myself? Not to say that I'm some pathological liar, right? But is my self-esteem getting in the way of me being honest about who I am, about truly sharing the story of who Lebu is, the narrative of my existence, the narrative of my identity? Am I too quick to dismiss my good qualities and the things that make me special and unique and amazing in the name of being humble, in the name of, well, I don't believe that guy because they must be lying. The compliment is just a ruse. They want something from you. They're just buttering you up. They're about to come with, a request, but refusing to accept other elements, right? Other stories that have become evident, or other stories that other people tell because it doesn't fit my narrative, right? And my narrative, how true is my narrative really? You know what I mean? Because when you have a low self-esteem, when you have imposter syndrome, when you're struggling, with poor mental health, anxiety, depression, your depression will convince you of really wild things, right? Your low self-esteem will have you convinced that you're nothing but a piece of shit and a waste of space, right? Anxiety will tell you that all you do is attract bad energy, that everything that can go wrong will go wrong specifically to you because you deserve it. And now, how true is that really? Does everything that happens in your life, is it all bad? No. Are you more than just the worst thing you have ever done or the worst feeling you have about yourself? Yeah. Are there things that you are good at? Yes. Are there people that like you? Yes. With no ulterior motive? Yes. But why isn't that the story that we're telling about ourselves? Why do we focus so much on the negative? One bad thing happens and we harp on it and harp on it and harp on it and tell more and more people, or we don't tell anyone and just have it replay in our mind over and over again, letting it keep us up at night. We can't sleep because we're haunted by memories of moments where we were terrible, where we were imperfect, where we were embarrassing and less than ideal. Yet somehow the tapes of us being great, the tapes of us being a good friend, kind, generous, smart, those tapes are collecting dust in the corner while the tapes of your worst moments are well worn. The scenes burnt onto the screen. Why? Why do we do that to ourselves? Because as much as I didn't appreciate hearing someone else describe me in a manner that was less than flattering, even though it was true, how does my inner child feel when I'm describing myself in an even worse manner, when it's all based on nothing, when it's all based on bullshit, when I'm overly inflating small moments, misreading someone's facial expression, and then, conflating it with things that I already feel about myself, because feelings do not equate to truth. Yes, I might feel like I'm a shitty person, but am I really? And why am I letting fleeting feelings, fleeting emotions dictate how I define myself, how I see myself? Why am I making something as fickle as a feeling a fact? I've been seeing on Instagram a lot this thing trending of like, how do people get to a point where they don't care what other people think of? And I'd love to get to that point, right? Where you don't care what other people think of you. But I think what has been like a consistent response to that question has been that you really can't read people's minds. You have no idea what someone is thinking, right? And whatever you think they're thinking is actually just what you think about yourself. And when I heard that person say that, I mean, it's been in a lot of, Instagram reels. So I'm not sure if I could find the specific link, but if I do, I will share it. But when I heard that, it hit me in my chesticles. It really did. Because I have projected a lot of my feelings about myself onto other people so many times. Like, when your outfit is shit, or not when your outfit is shit, but there's an issue with your shoe, right? Or your pants, and there's just like one little thing about your outfit that you feel insecure about. And now everyone who looks at you, you think they're looking at that thing. You think that is the only thing that they can notice, right? That like, oh my gosh, they can see that my fupa is out. They can see it. They're disgusted by it. Why are they pulling that face? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. When that person has no clue, right? They didn't notice it at all. You're the only one who sees it. And more often than not, that's the case. You're the only one who's seeing this terrible thing. Everyone else is taking you in as a full picture. They're noticing your smile and your warm energy. They're admiring your height and glowing skin, right? They might be slightly jealous of just how amazing you are, your posture, and how you articulate yourself, right? That they have no ill will towards you. That they too are looking at you in the midst of your own little anxiety attack about how they can see your fupa. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, she can see that I haven't washed my hair in a couple of days. That is long overdue. Oh my gosh, she's judging me. I've embarrassed myself in front of this goddess. Do you get what I mean? And we're all just stuck in our heads, projecting our thoughts onto other people, instead of just taking ownership of those thoughts and doing away with them. Saying, well, fuck it. This is my hair, and I don't care. what other people think of it, because I know why I haven't had the time to wash it. And as soon as I can, I will, but that's not the case right now, and that's fine. That not every piece of information about you has to have a moral energy to it. Not everything in your life has to be good or bad. It just has to be. So, yes, I haven't washed my hair in a long time. And that's not good or bad, it's just a fact. Yes, I have a fupa. And that's not good or bad, it's just a fact. Yes, I'm going through the most. I've had a difficult past, and I've had to overcome a lot to get to this point, and I needed a little assistance. I reached out to a Shoot for Purpose program because I needed some change in my life. I wanted to try something new. I was grasping at straws and happened to stumble across this. That is true. And it's neither good nor bad. And it says nothing about who I am as a person. A lot of these things that we worry about, people judging us for, really has no bearing on who we are as people. Yes, it might make us look, lazy and disorganized and whatever. But again, we know what's true. I know what's true about me. So why does it matter if someone else is going to interpret it as something else? Because I know that me having a messy outfit and maybe not having time to take a shower that day or whatever, but still managing to go to the shops and do a little grocery run, that's my best. That's the best that I could do that day. And I know that. And there's nothing wrong or good about not taking a shower that day or taking a shower. It doesn't make you a better person because you happen to do your full 5-step face routine and you managed to go to the gym and you saved, a cat from a tree and you managed to do this, that, and the other all before going to work at 7 a.m. and you're just such a fantastic person. No. Did you do all of those things? Yes. Were they good or bad? Neither. They just happened. Those things happened. You did those things. You found the energy to do that. And the next day when you don't have the energy to do all of that, that's fine too. I understand the need for discipline and consistency and better self-talk and all of those things. But I think the best discipline you can ever have is with your mind before it comes to what you're doing on the outside. That discipline with yourself. Learning not to be so judgmental. Learning to just accept yourself for who you are in this moment. Yes, we can work towards being a better version of ourselves, but what's wrong with loving who you are right now? Because hate hasn't been working. It really hasn't. You've been trying it for several years now, and it hasn't worked at all. So how about you try something new? Be disciplined in your rejection of false narratives about yourself, especially coming from yourself. You can't control what other people say about you. But if you are firm in understanding the truth of who you are, if you know exactly who you are, if you can back yourself 10 toes down and stand on business and say, listen, I hear what you're saying and that might be true for you, but that's not true for me. And I know the truth about me. Same way if somebody were to call me thin. And that's their perspective, right? That's what they see in whatever delusional world they're in. They see me as skinny spice. Do you get what I mean? I know that's not true, bitch. In the same way that if someone were to come around and call me stupid, straight up dimwit, bitch, I know I have several brain cells to rub together. I might not see myself as being the smartest in the room or being super smart, but I know that I am quick on my toes. I am smart enough, right? And I have several brain cells to rub together, so you cannot call me dumb, right? So someone saying that about me doesn't hurt. It's the comments in areas, the comments about things that I'm not so sure about, that I'm not so confident about. That's where they can get me. Right? And someone who is trying to hurt you, they suss you out for your weaknesses, and then that's where they attack. They don't go for the areas that they know you're confident about. They go for the areas that they know that you are, unsure of and insecure about. So how about we armor ourselves in the truth? Armor ourselves with the truth of who we are. The truth of the fact that we are amazing people. We are kind, compassionate, considerate, empathetic, that we, are creative, right? That we make people feel safe, that we are strong and ambitious and driven and all these other things, right? That if it is not true for us right now, that we can work towards making those things true. But in the meantime, what is the truth? I'm struggling with ambition. I'm struggling with focus. I'm struggling with drive. I feel maybe burnt out or not so motivated to work in the way that I used to. All of these things, that is true, and that is neither good nor bad. That the things that are true about us do not have to have a moral bearing on who we are as people. That they are just facts about us. That's it. That, yeah, right now I'm struggling with motivation. I don't know what it is, but I'm losing steam. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm working on it, but until then, this is where I'm at right now. Period. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And once we can get to that point, nothing can touch us. Even when I find myself in a position where someone from Shoot for Purpose is then describing me as someone who's gone through a lot and in need of some motivation through photography, it's not gonna touch me in my bones. It's not gonna upset me and my homegirls, right? Because yeah, it's true. And in the same way that if they were saying that we only recruit women, I'm not sitting there feeling some type of way about other people knowing that I'm a woman. Yeah, I am. And so how is it that I'm feeling some type of way about the fact that I needed extra support. I needed a program like this to give me the boost that, I was searching for. How is that any different? It's just a fact. It happened. It's true. I needed the boost and I got it. Thanks. So yeah. Where was I going with this? Oh, the point that I'm trying to make here is be kind to yourself and reflect on what story you're telling about yourself and whether it's true or not. Seek the truth, right? And do not judge yourself for what your truth is. But accept it as a fact while you can still work on changing it for that fact to no longer be true for you at some point. But accept that it is true right now, right? But shame has no function in a healthy relationship with yourself or with others. It can never be the basis of a healthy relationship because it destroys, it tears people apart. And you being ashamed of yourself for anything really is not useful. Yes, obviously, if you've committed a crime and you're a pedophile and whatever, you should be deeply ashamed. You should crawl into a hole and die. That's for the pedophiles. I mean, depending on who you murdered and why you murdered them, that's also up for debate, right? But even then, if you say, okay, cool, I'm feeling this attraction, but I'm not going to act on it because I know that it's wrong, and I'm going to seek help, right? That yes, society might judge you, but you know what you've done to protect other people from this desire that you're struggling to fight, right? So shout out to you for not contributing to the harm in society, right? Because you find yourself in this position and you've done something about it, right? And now we've gone down a rabbit hole and talking about murderers and pedophiles. I don't know why I was discussing this or why I even brought it up, but you get my point. You know what I mean? You being fat, you being a procrastinator, having bad eating habits or smoking, you having, casual sex all the time with people that you don't even know, you know what I mean? You gossiping about friends, all of these things. You have to accept those things about yourself first before you can work towards changing them. Because shame and misery, they love company. They bring you back in. It's not something that wants to go away. It wants to stay, right? It loves eating at your joy. It gets fat and happy on stealing moments of pride and joy, moments of safety, moments of comfort. It loves taking up all that space in your brain, space that could be used on other things, things that are a little more productive, things that are a little more positive. Shame will never allow you to let the sun in. So you need to let go of shame if you want to let go of the items you feel ashamed of. And in the meantime, accept who you are while you slowly shed the weight of these things that you are not happy about. And you not being happy about certain aspects of your life and who you are, that's also not something to be ashamed of or to want to hide. You can be honest with yourself. And if necessary, you can share those thoughts with other people around you who you feel comfortable with, to say like, I know I come across as, a plus size influencer or whatever, but I'm actually not happy at this weight. I'm not happy in this body. I want to be able to do more. There's so many activities that I feel held back from participating in, and I just want to get to a point where I can physically do all the things that I want to do, and then my body's not holding me back anymore. But I appreciate my body for where it's brought me to. This is my home, this is my body, and I love it. But I think I just want to do some renovations. I don't want to move, but I'm going to do some home renovations, do some updates, because the home is outdated. It's no longer serving the function that it needed, that I needed it for back then. My needs have changed, and therefore I need to, make some changes on the home front as well. So that's what I'm doing. Bum, bum, bum. Done, So yeah, those are my thoughts, lovers and friends. And I really hope that, as time goes by, as we learn to be better and do better for ourselves, that we can get to a point where other people's opinions of us don't matter as much as our opinion of ourselves, right? And that we continue to hold ourselves to a high standard while still accepting and acknowledging and embracing who we are in this moment and loving ourselves to the next goal. Loving ourselves along this journey of self-improvement. But yeah, you can't read thoughts. So whatever you think other people are thinking of you, or just what you're thinking of yourself, and if you think that person is cruel and like what the hell's wrong with them, that's a question you need to pose to yourself. Why are you being so cruel to yourself? What have you done to deserve this cruelty? And what are you going to do to let go of it? You stop that thought in its tracks and say no. It is not a good or bad thing to be here in this moment like this. Other people might not accept it, but do I accept me? What can I do to accept me? To affirm me? Do you feel me? Anyway, this has gone on for so long. And I promise we'll be back to the short, quick, episodes. But you've got time. You're on leave. So you've got time. You can sit down and relax and listen to this while you get yourself ready for the week ahead. It's a shorter week, but somehow the weeks after a long weekend always feel so long. Oh, those are the longest weeks for me. I just feel like I want to have started this week on like a Thursday, you know what I mean? Where my first day back at work, already I can say, oh, at least tomorrow's Friday. But instead, I'm not. You know what I mean? I still got so many days between me and the weekend. Like, what's the use? Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we have a surprise episode coming up for you down the line somewhere. Me, 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 me. So I'm excited for that, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.